You think silence is patience, but it's merely a mask for indifference. You think withholding words is an act of kindness, but all it does is deepen misunderstandings and create distance. You hide behind excuses, yet never truly confront your own heart. You tell yourself they should understand, but you never dared to say the words that could bridge the divide. You criticize from your own perspective, yet have you ever stopped to ask, what have I missed? You believe you know everything, but perhaps, in your silence, you've lost the love you once held. This silence might surround you, or perhaps it lies hidden within your heart. Left unbroken, it has the power to freeze love, creating a chasm that feels impossible to bridge. But for one couple, the moment they found the courage to speak their hearts, the silence shattered. They uncovered that honesty and understanding are the keys to connection. As they stepped out of the cold, they rediscovered the warmth of love they had once thought was lost. 7 years into their marriage, their home felt eerily quiet, like an empty shell reverberating with coldness. 24 days of silence had frozen their hearts, leaving no room for words. At the dinner table, only the clinking of dishes broke the heavy stillness, while the air seemed almost suffocating, as if it were solid. Each evening, the husband sat on the couch, his eyes fixed on the TV screen, never changing the channel. His gaze was as lifeless as still water. The wife, in contrast, retreated to the bedroom, clutching a pillow as she silently wept. Her tears soaked the pillowcase, leaving behind the traces of her unspoken pain. This relationship seemed to have reached its breaking point. One sleepless night, the wife felt crushed under the weight of their silence. She had lost all hope in their seemingly sturdy marriage. Wandering to the living room, she saw her husband's phone lying casually on the couch. Its screen flickered faintly in the dark, like a weak pulse. Compelled by an instinct she couldn't explain, she picked it up, her fingers brushing the cold surface. Her heart raced as she opened it, bracing herself for a truth she had long avoided. She unlocked the phone and found a message that had never been sent. It was simple, yet it pierced her deeply.
I'm sorry. It's not that I don't love you. I just don't know how to express it.
The simple words struck her like a bolt of lightning, instantly piercing her heart. A wave of grief swept over her, and tears fell silently, blurring her vision as the phone trembled in her hands. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. The emotions that had been buried deep within her, held back by silence, now surged forward like a flood. She could no longer hold back or suppress them. It felt as if her heart had been torn apart in an instant. Yet at the same time, a quiet warmth seemed to gently melt away the sharp edges of her pain.
Is this what he's been trying to say all along?
She whispered to herself. Her tears blurred her vision, but her mind replayed fragments of their love. How he once scoured the city for her favorite flowers, stayed up all night nursing her when she was ill, and emptied 3 years' savings for a ring she cherished. He had always loved her, but his love had been buried under his inability to express it, while she had taken it for granted, thinking love was an unspoken understanding. Gripping the phone tightly, her tears flowed relentlessly, but for the first time, they brought a warmth that felt like release. In that moment, she realized their silence wasn't born of indifference, but of the unspoken fears and vulnerabilities they had never faced together. She placed the phone on the nightstand and returned to bed, weeping quietly through the night. By dawn, her tears had dried, and her heart had found a moment of peace, though her spirit remained heavy. The next morning, she looked into the mirror at a face that was tired, yet resolute. Her eyes, bloodshot but clear, reflected a clarity she hadn't known before. She knew that the turning point in their relationship could only begin with the step she was about to take. Taking a deep breath, she resolved to drop her defenses and move forward with the first step toward change. For the first time in weeks, she made breakfast and set the table, sitting quietly as she waited for her husband. When he walked into the kitchen and saw the home-cooked meal, his eyes widened in surprise. He froze, uncertainty flashing across his face, unsure of how to react.
Can we talk?
She asked, her voice gentle yet firm, like a warm key slowly unlocking the door to their hearts. He lowered his head, pausing in silence before slowly raising his gaze. His eyes were filled with a mixture of shame and vulnerability.
You saw my phone, didn't you?
His voice was barely audible, trembling as though he were a child caught in wrongdoing. She nodded, tears welling up again. But this time, there was a new strength in her heart, a sense of clarity that began to grow within her.
I know you love me, but I've never really told you that I don't know how to love you either. I thought you'd just understand me, but I never took the time to help you understand. We both thought love would come naturally, but it needs communication. It's not something we should ever take for granted.
His eyes reddened, his voice breaking as he whispered.
I was so afraid of failing you, of not being enough, that I chose silence, thinking it would protect you. But I never realized that silence could make you feel so alone, so unloved.
In that fragile moment, their hearts finally found their way to each other. The cold silence that had encased them for so long began to crack and melt, as if the very walls around their souls were being gently dismantled. Her tears fell freely, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken pain, yet suddenly filled with the warmth of long-awaited release and a quiet, profound joy. She saw the raw, trembling vulnerability in him, the fears he had hidden so deeply, and he saw the aching loneliness she had carried silently, the unfulfilled longing in her heart. In that shared vulnerability, something unspoken but powerful shifted between them. They spoke for hours, as if each word they shared was another thread unraveling the years of miscommunication, misunderstandings, and silent suffering. They revisited their sweetest memories, the ones that had once defined their love, but now tinged with the bittersweet truth of how far they had drifted. They spoke of the disillusionment that had slowly crept into their lives, and yet they also dared to voice their hopes for a future they once thought was lost. Through this conversation, they understood, at last, that the love they had always felt was never gone. It had simply been buried beneath layers of fear, silence, and unmet expectations. They had been so close to each other, yet had drifted apart, not from lack of presence, but from the absence of true communication. In this raw, vulnerable exchange, they rediscovered each other, and in doing so, they rediscovered themselves. They gazed at each other in silence. Sunlight filtered softly through the mist outside, casting a gentle glow on a room once overshadowed by cold indifference. She lowered her head, offering a faint smile, as if releasing a warmth that had long been hidden deep inside her. Her husband let out a quiet sigh, his eyes no longer clouded with anxiety, but filled with both the heaviness of regret and the lightness of release. Her voice broke the silence, tender yet strong with years of reflection.
I always thought love meant silently giving, that we should understand each other without words. I believed love was about unspoken understanding, a bond that needed no explanation. But now I see if only we had been brave enough to speak our hearts earlier, perhaps these misunderstandings wouldn't have quietly piled up and driven us so far apart.
Her husband met her gaze, nodding slowly. A flicker of guilt and realization passed through his eyes as he replied.
I thought the same. I believed silence was patience, that it was love. But I see now, we built walls between us with our silence, drifting further apart. I was wrong. Silence doesn't bring us closer, it isolates us. Real love means being brave enough to speak, to be understood. I should have let you hear my heart.
They sat still, and in that simple conversation, the cold, icy barriers between them began to melt more and more. It felt as if the silence that had once trapped them dissolved completely, leaving only clarity and understanding.
All this time, we've misunderstood each other.
She said, taking a deep breath, her eyes now filled with a fire of determination.
We were both waiting for the other to read our hearts, but neither of us ever truly spoke our truth.
He looked at her, his gaze softening with newfound tenderness and understanding.
You're right. Communication is everything. Without it, all we're left with is empty guessing.
Their eyes met again, and in that shared glance, all the hurt and misunderstandings melted away. They finally understood that love isn't about enduring silent battles or relying on unspoken gestures. True love is about daring to be vulnerable, to express what's deep inside, and to listen with an open heart. For all these years, they had denied each other that chance. From that day forward, they committed to building bridges with their words, listening not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Years of silence had left them estranged, unsure how to bridge the growing gap between them. But with every attempt, the buried emotions began to resurface. Each honest conversation became a key, unlocking doors to understanding and compassion. Slowly but steadily, they learned to express their love, and in doing so, embraced each other's vulnerabilities and imperfections. They realized that only by breaking the silence and confronting their deepest fears could they truly touch each other's souls. Through open, honest communication, they rebuilt their trust and rekindled their bond. The wounds of the past healed in the warmth of understanding, replaced by a love no longer bound by silence, but forged in courage and the beauty of vulnerability. The love that had once been hidden, buried under years of misunderstanding, bloomed anew, vibrant and alive. This story reveals how silence, when left unspoken, can quietly destroy the most precious bonds. Every time you silently bear this distance, thinking it's something you can handle, you unknowingly erode the foundation of your relationships. Each moment of avoidance deepens the divide between you and those you cherish. Love isn't about silent understanding. It thrives on communication, the courage to express, and the willingness to be understood. Whether in our families, friendships, or workplaces, silence might feel like a temporary shield, but it's an invisible wall that separates us. True closeness isn't born from quiet endurance. It's born from opening your heart and speaking your truth. Real bravery lies not in suppressing your voice, but in breaking the silence. It's in sharing your needs, your feelings, and your hopes. If you continue to avoid, the misunderstandings will only deepen, and the distance will grow until what you treasure most slips through your fingers. Stop making excuses. Stop running from responsibility. Today is the day to confront your heart and take that step. Break the silence. Let your love and voice be heard. You will discover that what once seemed an insurmountable gap can dissolve through the power of honest conversation, and your relationships can bloom anew with trust and connection. If today's insights resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more transformative lessons on psychology and self-growth. Let's continue this journey toward a more fulfilling life together.